Here's something interesting for you all. We've pretty much all experienced what I'm hopefully going to be able to demonstrate to you. Have a look down here. CPU HD system performance. Okay, so this is literally telling us how much we're hitting, shall we say, the processor, and through accessing the hard drive, how well the CPU and the hard drive are coping with this kind of activity. Okay, and you can see every now and again we're getting quite a lot of we're hitting the CPU and the HD quite hard. Okay, and this can often result in the ubiquitous logic cannot process. Let's just see if we can force logic to have a problem with that and get that little dialog box pop up. I've got a funny feeling in this project somewhere around here, this project it does display that problem. Just keep an eye, always keep an eye on this little indication down here. What you can do is control click on that transport there to customize the transport bar. Lots of different customization options there. There you go, that's what I was looking for. Logic Pro disk is too slow or system overload. Okay, so what can we do about that? There are a couple of things we can do about that. So disk is too slow, logic cannot process the information, etc., etc. So first port of call will be here. Logic Pro menu, preferences, audio. And what we find here are a couple of preferences that can sometimes help. The I/O buffer size, this is input and output. Okay, so what we need to do is, if we're running lots of plugins, lots of audio files, lots of tracks, and we're having this problem, what we need to do is go here, as I say, Logic Pro menu, preferences, and go to audio preferences, and go to the I/O buffer size and look at the size. Now this is the biggest buffer possible. Okay, so that's fine. Well, that's not necessarily fine, but that's the biggest buffer available to us in Logic. So that will provide more processing power for large amounts of plugins, tracks, etc. If conversely you're playing some MIDI information in from a MIDI keyboard and you find that you're getting a delay when you hit the keyboard, you find that you hear the note play a bit after you've actually touched it, and it's kind of putting you off playing. What you can do is actually reduce this buffer size to as small a size as possible. I'd recommend probably 128. Okay, so we can reset that, apply changes, and you should find that you lose the delay as you're playing, but what you'll find then is that Logic's more likely to crash through not being able to process all of the plugin and track information. So at a point where you're not needing the MIDI keyboard, pop that buffer size back up to its maximum size, and that will allow you to process more information. There's another way, back on the MIDI keyboard subject, we can click this low latency mode, and you should find that any latency, that is delay between your playing a MIDI keyboard or any other input device and actually hearing what you're playing, is completely marginalized by just turning that button on there. Okay, so anyway, first port of call, if we're having that problem with processing all of the plugins and tracks in a project, is to go to this I/O buffer size and increase it. Okay, if that doesn't help, there's one other thing that we can do, and if we go to the view menu, okay, and we can configure the track header, just to show you that the area here is the track header. Okay, it's all of the information pertaining to each of the individual tracks. So let's configure the track header, and we find that there are a bunch of buttons not being shown. So I'm going to take this one, freeze, and I'm going to tick freeze, and we now see the freeze icon in the track header. So call that done. And what we can do then is freeze tracks. Anything that we're not actually working on at the moment that we don't need to change plugin information regarding, then we can simply freeze it, and that will effectively create temporary audio files of these tracks. with the plugin information intact in the temporary files. Therefore, Logic won't have to process the plugins, and you should find that you can then play back a track that was problematic. Click the freeze buttons and just hit play on the sequencer, and you'll find that it will then freeze the tracks that you've chosen to freeze, and you will find that you can then play back a project, almost always be able to play back a project that was crashing Logic, not crashing Logic, causing that problem whereby Logic can't process the information regarding the track and therefore stops. So freeze the tracks that you're not working on. Once you've frozen them, what you can then do is continue with the track, but you may get to a point where you want to, shall we say, change the equalization on one of these tracks, change some of the plugin parameters on one of these frozen tracks. What you'll have to then do is unfreeze that track to be able to do so, because obviously it's not playing back the regular track and processing the plugins for that track at this moment. It's playing back a temporary audio file. So for instance, if I go to this track here and I want to change the compressor settings, I see this little freeze icon pops up that tells me I can't actually alter that. I can change levels, I can change pan, that kind of stuff, but I can't actually change any of the plugin information unless I do this. Just click on the freeze button again, that unfreezes it. I can then change my compression settings or whatever it is that I want to change, pop freeze back on, hit play, refreeze it, done deal. Hopefully that's been of some use to you. Cheers.